Yeah.
Elected to 4 terms in the Minnesota House of Representatives, including service as a minority whip from 2008 to 2010, he's dedicated to increasing voter accountability and acquiring a form of photo ID to vote. He's also committed to defend Minnesota in the fight to repeal the federal health care bill. Dan Severson.
Well, first I'm going to introduce the better part of this relationship, and that's my beautiful wife, Kathy Jo. She is the wind beneath my wings. You guys may have seen Max here. He's our election integrity watchdog, but he's watching the car right now. But I wanted to just speak to your hearts. I want to speak to your hearts right now. I want to say that you are the seed of a great awakening in this country. It's starting here in Minnesota, and it's going to go out from here. But this is a seed awakening of going back to our founding principles of God and country. And you know what? When you see people rise up, like Gretchen, and Mary, and Lee, and Tim Tingelstead, Greg Wurzel, Chris Barton, people who understand that the hour is desperate, and they're willing to do what our founding fathers did. And the end of that declaration, they said, that by divine protection, we commit to pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And when you hear Lee Byberg say, you know what, I'm taking unpaid leave for 5 months because I believe the time is so important to step up. You, sitting in those chairs out there, are part of that process. Because you have the heart to see America come back to its greatness, to come back to the freedoms that God has called us to. You know, Scripture says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, and turn from their wicked ways, and seek my face, I will hear, and I will heal their land. That's the process we're going through right now. And I want to tell you that Minnesota didn't elect Al Franken, Mark Ritchie did.
Yeah!
Yeah! And you know what's cool? You know what's cool?
A bunch of fellas.
And a bunch of fellas, that's right. About 4 months ago, I started saying that, and you know, the opposition just hates that. But they have no comeback to it, because it's true. And because we're starting to see it unfold now, even in the national news. Yesterday at Fox News, Mark Ritchie elected Al Franken. And so the whole process, because we are doing that principle, if we will humble ourselves and pray, God will begin to move on our behalf, and we will begin to see the things that have put us into bondage break. And so this whole process is something that we really need to press into. And this is part of that awakening. This is part of that process that's going to take place. We're going to see things happen that we never would have thought would have been able before November 2nd. But it's because we, the people, are dedicated to the principles that God created this country, and they are certain inalienable rights that men do not give us, He gives us. And if we are willing to stand up for those rights, He will give them back to us. And I want to talk just a moment, because I believe that the Tea Parties are such an exceptional gathering, because it's not about whipping it up. It's about educating people. Right. And the whole issue with photo ID. Now you're going to hear from the left that photo ID disenfranchises the old, the elderly, the poor. They can't get an ID card. And you know what? That has been put to bed. In April of 2008, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on a 6-3 decision that it is constitutional, that it actually does not disenfranchise, that it may cause an inconvenience for people, but that inconvenience for a few people is far outweighed by the confidence that it gives to the general electorate. And that was a challenge that's called a facial challenge. It means on the face of photo ID, they tried to say that it was unconstitutional. But then we came to the next phase, and that's an apply challenge. When photo ID was applied, then they tried to say, okay, now we're going to prove to you that it's unconstitutional. And they put an apply challenge. 3 weeks ago, the Indiana Supreme Court, a liberal court, 2-3 liberal court, ruled 4-1 that photo ID is constitutional. Woo! That's right. That is awesome. So now the liberals can no longer use that rhetoric that photo ID disenfranchises. You just say to them, you know what, it's been found constitutional at the federal level, and it's been found constitutional at the state level. There is no more question. This is a done deal. Photo ID is about integrity in elections. It's about holding people accountable. When we have felons that are voting, and I'm not just talking about people that have a whole bunch of tickets. I'm talking about child molesters. I'm talking about people who have hardcore criminal backgrounds are going to the polls knowing that they shouldn't be voting, and they're voting against the law. And the Secretary of State that we have currently in place was advised of this a month before the elections. There was a news conference that came out and they said, we've got people on these rolls that shouldn't be on there. The next day he came forward and he said, oh yeah, we know about that, we're taking care of it. Yeah, well, here we are, 18 months later, and guess what? They're still on the rolls. And unless we had some organizations like Minnesota Majority, Minnesota Majority, a great organization, and the other one is Minnesota Voters Alliance, and these are organizations of people just like you who have rised up to meet the challenge. The Lord has raised them up in this day and this hour to try to begin to take our government back. Unless we had organizations like this, we would be in the same fix 4 months from now, having corrupt elections. But I'm going to close with this. Now, when I went around and I talked at the conventions, I typically said, we need you at the polls as election judges. Now the call is different. Now the call is about poll watchers. Now the call is about you as individuals signing up to be poll watchers at the individual districts. And if you can't be a poll watcher or you don't want to be a poll watcher because you have good integrity in your elections locally, then think about being a poll watcher down in Minneapolis or some of these other places where we have corrupt elections going on. Think about that, because you can make the difference. I am here because there was a lady in Hibbing that was a poll watcher, and she wrote me a letter with 13 violations. I took it all the way to the Supreme Court, didn't get any action on it, and I said, you know what? If you know there's a problem, and you don't step up to be a part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. Right. That's why we need you at the polls as poll watchers, and that is part of your process here. Now, Chris Barden and myself, we're going to go around the state and we're going to talk about clean elections. We're talking about reforming elections and bringing integrity to the election system so that the voice, the genuine voice of the people of Minnesota is heard on election day. I want to thank you and say God bless you for being here, being part of this great awakening. Thank you.